Okay, this one is going to be another subscriber comment based one. As a matter of fact, I've been thinking about, even if the topic of the video is something completely different, I've been thinking about grabbing a subscriber comment or a comment from my channel every week and reading one at the end of every video. Just as because I get a lot of good feedback on here, but sometimes I get good ideas from the comments themselves. Not to mention the fact that some people say some really brilliant things when they're commenting on these videos. There's a few subscribers that can sum up the. Well, actually, a lot of the people that share their experiences and the people that sum up the AA program the way they do, I mean, the perspectives are really good. And I just kind of got an idea that I may start doing that rather than just trailing off at the end of a video like I'm known for doing and just saying until next time. There's been so many minutes. It would kind of give it a way to round the entire thing out, you know. But this particular comment came in a hypothetical scenario, and they wanted to hear other people's feedback on it, and I kind of answered it already, but I was going to talk about it in this video too, and have everybody chime in that's experienced what they're saying. But they commented and they said, you know, the funny thing, let's say you quit drinking without meetings by whichever method works for you. I can guarantee, and I like that term, that if you ran into someone you knew from AA and you told them I haven't drank in 6 months, a year, or whatever, the first thing they would ask is, what meetings are you going to? When you reply, I don't go to meetings, they would no longer be happy about your being sober and say, great job. They would look at you sideways and probably say something about how you'll drink again without meetings. Granted, this is a hypothetical conversation, but I would bet anything this is true, and I did have someone similar experience, although not an exact quote of this conversation. I could see his body reaction and the look in his eyes. That's 100% true. That's not just a hypothetical scenario. I remember right after I had left AA before, and I think I've talked about this before on here once, but I was going to bring it up again. I remember I had been out in a cult for close to a year at the time, and I bumped into somebody in public, and it was somebody that was somewhat friendly towards me. I've said on here many times before that when I was in the final couple of years of AA, I was pretty much a complete total outcast. For one thing, I had been branded as a chronic relapser, and nobody really believed that any period of sobriety that I was going to put together was going to last very long. I didn't believe it either. I didn't think I was ever going to quit drinking. When I left AA, I literally was convinced that I was going to drink myself to death and I was going to die drunk. And I had a lot of AA people that seemed overjoyed about that prospect. They were telling me I was far too smart for the program, that I couldn't humble myself, that I couldn't find a power greater than myself. You know, sometimes they speak in these glowing tones like they're saying something so mystical. I remember one guy saying, well, you can't find a power greater than yourself. You know, you're not being fucking mystical. You're not on some fucking National Geographic special talking about the wonders of the universe with ignorant statements like that. But this was someone that was somewhat friendly towards me. I had passed time with him. I bumped into him a year later, and the first words out of their mouth was, "Are you still sober?" They didn't. It's been a year since I've seen you. You haven't asked me how I'm doing. You haven't asked me what I've been up to. You haven't asked me anything about life in general. You haven't offered anything to me about life in general. The first words out of your mouth was, "Are you sober?" I didn't even bother answering them at the time. I just, I didn't even go any further in the conversation. I kind of just gave him a look of contempt and I walked away from him. Now, the second I did that, because I was still kind of deprogramming from the whole entire cult experience anyway, there was a part of me that actually worried about that. I said, well, now they're going to go back and they're going to tell everybody, oh, I saw him out and about. I asked him if he was still sober and he didn't even answer me. So we already know what that means. And then I began to realize that AA is so inundated with liars, with phonies, with people who make up stories at the drop of a hat, that it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered if I had told the guy, no, I haven't actually drank since leaving AA. It wouldn't have mattered if I had told him that I hadn't had a drink since I had left AA at the time, because he would have gone back and probably told that kind of story anyway. He would have probably gone, he probably did. He probably went back to the meeting that night or the next day or whenever he went back to his fucking meeting, and he probably said, well, I saw him out and about, and he looked miserable. He was very unhappy looking. And he just didn't look like he was doing good at all, And I asked him, I said, are you still sober? And he didn't even answer me. And, I offered to give him my number. I offered to talk to him. I said, I'll buy you coffee. I'll hang out with you all afternoon if you're having problems, And he just walked away because this program is for people who need it. I mean, for wanted. No, I almost rephrased that wrong. This program is for people who want it. It's not for people who need it. He probably said some bullshit like that anyway. So it really wouldn't have mattered what I had said. If I had said, yeah, I haven't drank in a long time and I'm doing great, he would have told a similar story. He would have probably said I was lying and he could smell liquor all over me at the time that happened. But it's very, very true that if you do bump into members after you've left the cult, because I have bumped into a few here and there, and they either pretend they don't see you, or they're going to ask you that dumbass question, what meetings are you going to? Are you still sober? Or something like that. I don't let it bother me anymore. It's just kind of a more revealing idea that the cult in of itself, and I've reiterated this on here several times, they don't care about you quitting drinking. They don't care if your life gets better. They don't care if you're doing any better in the world or not. They don't want to see you get well. The only thing they want to do is see you become an obedient cult member. It doesn't matter if you quit drinking by a different means. I mean, if you quit drinking by a different means, like smart recovery, or if you quit drinking if you were moderating through moderation management, me personally, I choose not to try to do that, but I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying alcohol just doesn't agree with me, and, after being this long without a drink, it's not something I'm really interested in. But it wouldn't matter what you told them. The fact that you're not living in meetings, sucking up to a sponsor, reading the big book every day over and over and over again, that would be all they would need. That's the only qualifying factors they need to shun you. That's why they use that ominous sounding term about being out there, It used to crack me up how many people in the meeting would always talk about how they cared about saving lives, Well, I'm not interested in your fucking feelings. I'm interested in saving your life. No, you're not. You're interested in making another cult member. If you can't make an obedient cult member out of the person that you're talking to like that, then you're not interested. You just think about it like this. If a person can say that they don't care about you, they care about saving your life, but can turn right around and sit in a meeting and say, well, some have to die so that others can live. Not everybody gets this thing. If they can get high off of the death of someone from an OD, if they can get high off the death of someone in a drunken driving accident like they seem wanting to do, then I don't think you got any room whatsoever to fucking lecture anybody about caring about their life. You care about being a sanctimonious, holier-than-thou asshole that you really are. That's what that's really and truly to me all about. They don't care. The funny thing about it is there was something I was examining at the time later on, of how many people shunned me, how many people refused to speak to me, and how many people just would cross the street if they saw me coming. See, at the time I left AA, I was really, really freaking down on my luck. Didn't have an automobile, didn't have a driver's license, was borderline homeless, and I was stuck in an area near where the AA clubhouse thing was. So, I had to deal with a whole lot of people crossing the street, or people pretending not to see me. And they would always walk with their fucking noses cocked way up in the air when they walked by, like that. Like they were just so above you and all that other shit. And the funny thing about that is it struck me later on that I cared about what those people thought in the years I was in AA, but the truth of the matter is, if I had blown my brains out, if I had committed suicide, if I had drank myself to death, they would have used me as a fucking torch to wave around in the meeting and say, ha, 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 see what happens when you don't do this program? Some have to die so that others can live. This is what happens to people who think they're too smart. He's dead now because he thought he was too smart for this thing. He's dead now because, he was too full of pride. He couldn't humble himself before God. That's what happens. They get so fucking overjoyed. They mask it with this righteous anger that they try to do when people die. But in truth, they're freaking overjoyed when that kind of thing happens because it gives them an opportunity to be overtly aggressive in meetings, to be bullying the newcomers, to act out in their kind of ways. It reminds me of, in the book 1984, and it's been explored in other scientific science fiction type themes before. In really repressive societies, there was only certain times when the totalitarian oppressive governments would allow you to become aggressive. There was a thing in 1984 called the 2-minute hate. Every day, the members of the party would all gather in one room and they would watch the face of the leader of the counter-revolution, if you want to call it, or the ultimate traitor to the party in 1984. They would all scream and shout and curse and throw things and spit and do whatever they wanted to do. And it was safe to show those kinds of emotions during the 2-minute hate. It was safe to do that because in a repressive society where you're not allowed to have those kinds of emotions and feelings towards anything other than enemies of the state, that was the one time that they knew they could guarantee that release for everybody. And I think it's almost the same kind of principle in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. You see, they can't show you what mean-spirited, bullying, angry pieces of shit they really are unless somebody dies of a drug overdose, unless somebody drinks themselves to death, unless somebody commits suicide. Then they get really angry, really high and mighty, really, really rage, infused with all their, hey, this is what happens when you don't do what we say. He left the safety of the fucking fold and now he's dead, just like you'll be if you don't cowtail to us. It's that kind of thing. It's purely fucking performance. I don't believe they're really that angry for a minute. I think they just do that because it's a great feeling, a great high for them to get a rush of endorphins off of. Some people get endorphins off of jumping out of airplanes and parachutes or bungee jumping or riding a roller coaster. With them, they like to see people die, alcoholic deaths. That gives them an endorphin rush like that, It's the same type of thing. But no, once you leave the AA cult religion, you are pretty much dead to them. I've encountered other people that have told me the same thing, even well-respected old-timer people who ended up getting drunk again and ended up being shunned and being forgotten about. There was one guy who had like 4 years, I remember at one point, and he was called on every meeting and he knew every fucking thing, and he ended up going on a bender. And I mean, he even told me one time privately, the only reason he was talking to me was because he was now in my boat, by the way, I want to add. But he told me, not one single human being called me, not one single person tried to talk to me. The few people who did talk to me talked down to me. It was like I didn't even exist any longer and had never been their friends. It did remind me one time of one of these meetings where they read that topic out of the big book where it says, how and where we define these people. We're going to find them in our communities. We're going to find them everywhere, all these wonderful people. And the topic was the fellowship, and of course all these phony fucks were sharing, oh, this fellowship saved my life, oh, the fellowship's so wonderful, oh, But they screwed around and they called on a guy that wasn't part of the in crowd and wasn't normally called on in meetings. The chairperson must have made a mistake. I think they were probably new, because if you notice, the seasoned chair people in meetings, they only call on the select crowd. The select crowd gets to talk every night, and if they call on somebody by mistake, you back there in the back of the room, sir, would you like to share? And you don't start talking cult script, then boom, you're cut off, but they called on this guy. And I was an outcast already. I was already shunned. I was already, the chronic relapser that was going to die anyway, so I didn't have any compunction about dying laughing while he was talking. But they called on him and he said, fellowship my fucking ass. He said, nobody really likes one another in here. Everybody talks terrible about one another in here. Everybody's overjoyed when somebody gets caught in an unsavory act or gets drunk in here. And you're going to sit there and read this thing about how and where are these people to be found? Well, they're not found in this community. He did his hands up like that, really. I was dying. And of course, the next 5 people that got called on, of course, they all attacked him. And, of course, they all took digs at him. And, of course, they all said all kinds of ugly things, not specifically to him, but in his direction. You've seen that kind of sharing, I'm sure, if you've been in those AA meetings. There's some people that don't like the fellowship and think the fellowship's not wonderful. I wonder where those people would be if they were drinking themselves to death tonight. I bet they'd want the fellowship by them there. The program says when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to be there. that kind of shit. They were doing that to him. After the thing was over, I don't know what made them feel compelled to try to talk to him. But a few of them came over to him, and they said, look, we didn't really, they were trying to smooth it over with it. And he said, no, you're just pissed off at me because I'm telling the fucking truth. He was doing his hands like this. He said, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. He said, bunch of you bastards were at the coffee shop a week ago repeating people's footsteps, naming their names, and you're talking about how wonderful the fellowship is. He stormed out, and I don't think I ever saw him again after that. You see people, sadly enough, they come and go at a rapid rate in AA. AA brags and brags about these, stellar astronomical success rates they have. But anybody who goes to AA for an extended period of time, you're pretty much obvious that people come and go and come and go and come and go. It's a really transitional society. It was funny. There was so many people that would get their 90 days, and they would look at me like I was just scum of the earth, because I had only gotten a week or a couple of days. And they'd say, well, you just keep coming back, and I would think to myself, I actually have been coming back the whole entire fucking time. It's people like you that come in here and all of a sudden you know everything and disappear in a month or two, and then you come back, on your drunken binges or whatever for a couple more meetings and disappear. But you assholes that don't keep coming back. Because I guarantee you, all those people that were judgmental towards me, some of them that were, kind of new, kind of getting in with the in crowd and everything, they'll vanish. At the end of a year, you got the same old-timer hegemony assholes judging everybody, talking crap about everybody. You got a whole new influx of treatment center people, and then you got people like me and many others like me that were always getting white chips and constantly coming and going. And, it's really embarrassing to me to admit that, I was going to meetings forever and ever and ever, knowing the thing didn't work, knowing it was bullshit, knowing that I was probably going to get drunk in a week or two, knowing I was probably going to get drunk in a day or two. There were people like me I saw, in retrospect, I feel bad for a lot of them now. I don't know what happened to them. But they were like me. They would string together a little time. They'd be shunned by everybody. A few of them would maybe get called on after they had a couple of weeks. And then, of course, they would get drunk again and everybody would shun them again. And they would come back. And that was kind of my story in AA for a very, very long time, longer than I like to think about. But that's pretty much the classes you've got in AA. You've got the ruling hierarchy, the hegemony, these old-timers who are sainted and placed on pedestals that everybody wants to suck up to. You got the 3 and 4 year people that, kiss their asses and know that when they get called on to meetings, they're going to echo all their talking points. Then you got the treatment center people and the new people that just get cycled in and out. And then you got the people like myself that were just relapsing over and over again, but addicted to going. There was a comment, and I don't want to read it this video. I'll read it the next video, that someone just left today where they were talking about the vicious cycle of needing a meeting and going to a meeting and finding out the meeting was horrible, then thus feeling like you need a meeting again. But that was something that the person posted as a hypothetical question on my channel that I was going to put on here for a video and invite everybody to comment and share your own experiences with it. I'm sure for those of you who have left AA, you know exactly what we're talking about here. You're ignored. You're forgotten. You're shunned. Nobody's going to even ask how you're doing. If you're trying to leave AA, but you're not towing the party line in the meetings by saying all the right things and kissing up to the right old-timers, you're still kind of on the shunned list. You could go to a meeting and say you had just lost a loved one and cry and say you were thinking about drinking that night, and after the meeting was over with, the old-timers would all huddle up in their little circles, and they would completely fucking ignore you unless you were kissing their ass or unless you were being sponsored by one of them. AA does not give a flying fuck about anybody getting better, about anybody quitting drinking, about giving you any coping mechanisms to deal with life in general. All they want is cult members who will toe the party line, preach the cult message, and recruit more cult members. Anyway, 18 minutes, 57 seconds. Next time, whenever I do a video, I'll try to close with a subscriber comment. See you guys next week. Let me know in the comments your experiences with AA after you left. Were you ignored? Were you shunned? Did the people who normally called you, did they not have the time of day to say to you anymore? Did they look at you like garbage when they knew you had quit AA? Let me know.